and they received, every man, a penny. The penny, the smallest unit of measure in our United States currency, or what has become the pence in British money, has paled into insignificance in our hectic modern days. However, thousands of years ago, it symbolized the amount necessary for decent room and board for a person, with some to spare, either for personal needs or for the folks back home. The fact that the penny is so devalued in our current time is due to the extreme corruption and dishonesty of humanity on the average, practicing an immorality known as inflation. More money for less product. The modern money is so corrupt, according to the standard of the ancient Phoenician traders who sailed to many ports in search of business. They carried with them touchstones by which they could test the nobility of the metals used in a nation's coinage. If the metal was cut with baser metals, such as the United States dime, which is no longer silver, but rather a copper sandwich, and so on, they would not trade with that nation, deeming them corrupt and unreliable. They had other tests, such as seeing if the death rate of the population exceeded the birth rate. That was also a sign of corruption and therefore unreliability. The penny unit, about what it would take for a night at a mid-class, decent, modern motel, 3 good, hefty square meals for the day, including a good breakfast for the next day, and extra money for clothing and savings, is the symbol of what it takes to keep today's Christian Economist going. For it is written, having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. That's what the scriptures admonish. But God is generous and usually includes housing as well. It's a concept known as sufficiency. This opposes the concept of wealth. Jesus left a message for the wealthy, that they were in reality desolate, naked, and needy, unbeknownst to them, because they had too much of something and necessarily, therefore, not enough of another. It's of utmost importance to know that opulence is the worst form of poverty, because it clouds out insufficiencies, which the owner cannot understand for him or herself, which only God can supply. But all that is nothing compared to the indictment the scriptures bring against modern business. Thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. Therefore, you should not be surprised that the resultant penal actions should come upon you who are practicing such corruption, especially and foremost those of what the Bible calls the household of faith. Among these punishments is the curse of Byzantium and the backslidden daughters of Zion, the scourge of God known as God's razor. More on that later. But the Lord wanted to emphasize how grievous this was to withhold the wages of your laborers, plus the fact that anything less than 100% employment is unacceptable to God. There was an honest man who built a thriving vineyard. He worked hard to nurture the vines of the grapes and prepare the vat for the juice to be made into fine wine. When all was done, the grapes were fully ripened on the vines. He set about to organize the workforce to harvest the fruit. The workers and the owner entered into arbitration and came to the agreement that each should be paid a penny, which in those days was about what in our day was enough for room and board plus more for expenses, which could be as much as $80 to $100 after taxes. In the month when this was written, October 2006. The day of harvest came, and all the workforce set to its task. It was sufficient for the job. But the owner did an unusual thing. He went into town where workers congregate just to check if everyone was okay. They weren't. There were still lots of unemployed laborers. He got them all together and sent them to work in the fields for the same penny wage. The owner kept doing things that wouldn't make sense to worldly business. He'd go back out every couple of hours, even to a few hours before the end of the workday, and employ everyone he found that was out of work, even finally at the end of the day. And a little later, the time came to call it a day. The whole group of workers were assembled to get paid, as this was done on a daily basis. The last workers got a penny each, and so on until the first workers got up to receive their salary. It was also a penny. They all became disgruntled, as the saying goes. They discussed amongst each other the wage, objecting that the ones who hadn't worked as long should have either been paid less, or that the ones that had been there originally, should have been paid more. But they should have been happy that the other workers would have enough to get by, room and board, and so on. Instead, they presumed to openly criticize the boss and got fired. Or as it said in the Bible, the owner said, "Take that which thine is, and go thy way. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Is thine eye evil because I am good?" In this parable or illustration, the Lord is showing us the key to prosperity. It is the job of the Christian, whose ministry happens to be that of business, to assure that his or her locale has 100% employment, and that everyone has at least a living wage. The work day is during the day, one shift only, not 2 or 3. No one is to get underpaid so that he or she will have to get other jobs to make ends meet. Certainly, there must be no such thing as the working homeless. Do these things, and you shall prosper. Go thou, and do likewise. But if you're in business just to make a profit, become wealthy, and be a success at what you do, you're in the wrong line of work. You're in the wrong line of work. If you're a Christian, you need to get into some other ministry. We all should be satisfied with sufficiency. Having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. Revelations chapters 17 and 18 describe a great religious prostitution, whose merchants were the mighty men. In other words, the ones who were endowed with the great talent. The great talent to care for the people. So the ones who were endowed with that talent, with the great talent to care for the people, had slumped into the dregs of corrupt mercantilism, where they only thought of using their abilities to take care of themselves and their cronies. So I'll repeat that again. Revelations chapter 17 and 18. It describes the great whore, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, a great religious prostitution whose merchants were the mighty men. And this is, the mighty men means, in other words, the ones who were endowed with the great talent to care for the people. All right? They lost track of that. They get the feeling that everybody else should fend for themselves. After all, if these merchants can make it, why can't the other people make it? And the reason is God's reasons. Among other things that we can understand, maybe the other people were not meant to be in business. So now we have a planet-wide situation where people are totally preoccupied with nothing but mercantilism and business. It's a prostitution. It's whoredom. You're being a whore. If that's you, and you're a Christian, you're in the wrong line of work. Get to work right away and find a different ministry. You know, if you're broke with a different ministry, or if you're just barely making it with a different ministry, I've got news for you. I've got good news for you. You might not think it's good news, but it is. Having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. As Paul said, I can both abound or be abased. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. The great religious prostitution, chapters 17, 18 in Revelations, whose merchants were called the mighty men. In other words, the ones who were endowed with the great talent to care for the people. And they had slumped into the dregs of corrupt mercantilism, where they only thought of using their abilities to take care of themselves and their cronies. And these people shall be dealt with. They shall be pushed out by a dictator. The dainty and the delicate ensnare the seeing blind. When asked if they would know the truth, they just say, "Never mind." "No thanks," say they, triumphantly. Destruction's road they take. After all, it's called prosperity. Yeah, right. Prosperity with chaos in its wake. So if you're in the business just to make profit, become wealthy, and be a success at what you do, you're in the wrong line of work. Yes, you are. If you're a Christian, you need to get into some other ministry. We all should be satisfied with sufficiency. Having food and raiment, let us therewith be content. The key to prosperity. Because you're going to have other things that are going to make you happy then.